Not all wars are fought on the battlefield. Some are fought in kitchens, on basketball courts, and in the quiet heartbreak of a son's eyes. Today, we're going to talk about the film The Great Santini, one of the most raw and emotionally honest portrayals of fatherhood ever put on screen. It's not just a story about a military man bringing his discipline home. It's a story about power, control, and what happens when love is buried beneath authority. But to truly understand The Great Santini, we have to look beyond the family drama and into the world of archetypes. Because Bull Meechum isn't just a character. He's the embodiment of something far older and darker, the Shadow Warrior. Before we dive into that, let's quickly set the stage with a bit of context. Released in 1979 and based on Pat Conroy's semi-autobiographical novel, The Great Santini follows the story of Marine fighter pilot Lieutenant Colonel Wilbur Bull Meechum, a man whose battlefield never ends, even at home. He brings the same military discipline, pride, and aggression he's known in war directly into his family life. His wife Lillian is loving but worn down. His children, especially his teenage son Ben, live under constant emotional pressure, desperate for connection yet unable to reach him. The film focuses on the fragile relationship between father and son, as Ben begins to question the authority and cruelty of the man he's supposed to admire, and eventually decides what kind of man he will become. It's a coming-of-age story, but one steeped in tension, silence, and the wounds passed down from fathers to sons. Robert Duvall's portrayal of Marine fighter pilot Bull Meechum is terrifying in its intensity. He runs his household like a miniature military unit, barking orders, issuing commands, and crushing any trace of rebellion. But what he calls strength is really fear, and what appears to be discipline is often cruelty in disguise. As author Robert Moore explains in King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, this is the bipolar shadow of the warrior archetype, a distortion of masculine energy that turns leadership into domination and guidance into emotional violence. The warrior in his fullness serves with honor and purpose, but when cut off from love and emotional intimacy, he fractures. One side becomes the sadist, cold, commanding, and critical. The other becomes the masochist, powerless, passive, consumed by guilt or rage. In The Great Santini, we meet the sadist. Bull Meechum constantly keeps his emotional sword drawn. He swings it at everyone, his wife, his daughters, and especially his son Ben, who simply wants a father, not a drill instructor. He mocks, he insults, he controls. Moore writes that this type of man pushes away those who love him most, while being utterly incapable of receiving their affection. It's not just tragic, it's deeply destructive. There's a powerful scene in the kitchen, one that breaks everything wide open. Bull, unable to control the emotional chaos boiling beneath his surface, explodes. He physically assaults his wife. The children attack him in return. This moment, as Moore describes, is the eruption of the Shadow Warrior's inner demon. His inability to be tender, to be genuinely intimate, turns his strength into a weapon. Even love feels like a threat, and the only language he knows is control. So, what does this teach us? 1. Detachment has a cost. Bull Meechum believes emotions are dangerous, soft, and unmanly, but this detachment opens the door to cruelty. Without emotional awareness, power corrupts. 2. Masculinity must be redefined. True strength isn't in domination, it's in knowing when to lower the sword, to listen, to feel, to nurture. 3. Fathers shape identity. Ben, as Moore notes, becomes painfully aware of the cost of his father's behavior. But awareness is the first step to breaking the cycle. We must ask ourselves, how many young men today are raised by shadow warriors? How many are taught that anger is strength and love is weakness? Moore compares Bull Meechum to ancient figures from mythology, gods of wrath and fire, bringers of storms and judgment, men who confuse fear for order, who mistakes control for love, and who lash out not from strength, but from pain they can't name. Bull is one of them. He doesn't rage because he's powerful. He rages because it's the only way he knows how to feel safe. Robert Moore calls this the Shadow Warrior, the man who, disconnected from empathy, turns his discipline into domination. The man who becomes cruel because vulnerability feels unbearable. We see echoes of Shiva dancing the universe into destruction. We see Yahweh flooding the world in a divine purge. We see a father who has turned his home into a battlefield, and in doing so has no idea how to come home again, because the Shadow Warrior doesn't just destroy others, he slowly, quietly, destroys himself. And that's where the Great Santini lands its deepest blow. It shows us that strength without compassion isn't noble. It's hollow. It's fear, dressed in uniform, pretending to be love. Bull Meechum doesn't change, not in the way we hope. He dies as he lived, unyielding, armored, respected by his men, and misunderstood by his family. But Ben changes, and that's the point. He sees the hurt. He names it. He begins to understand that what his father called strength was really survival. That the man who stood so tall in uniform was, in many ways, still a scared boy, fighting ghosts he never confronted. And in that recognition, Ben takes his first step away from the cycle. He chooses not to become his father. He chooses to become something new. The Great Santini isn't a war story. It's about the battle between love and fear, the fight to be seen, to connect, and to break free from the patterns we inherit. And maybe it reminds us that real courage starts when the armor comes off,